All right, call the board meeting to order at 6:00 PM and first item on the agenda is roll call.
Nyla Fry. Here. Trisha Brown.
Here.
Sam Kaufman. Kristen Rungy.
Here.
Aaron Moran. Here. Joe Zisselsberger.
Here.
Robert McPherson.
Here.
And next item is confirmation of open meeting compliance.
I can confirm that the draft agenda was published in the Waunakee Tribune on 8/16. The final agenda was posted in all three official posting locations on 8/15. And the final agenda and packet were made available online on 8/14. For those in the audience, please be sure that you've signed in with your name, address, and municipality for accurate record keeping, as well as anybody that wants to make public comment, please provide the form prior to the agenda item.
All right, next item on the agenda then is public comment.
I have no forms.
No, do we have anybody in the audience who'd like to make a comment? No. Anybody online?
I do see one person online, and if they click raise hand, we can bring them in for comment.
No raised hand? All right, we'll close public comment. Next item on the agenda then will be consent agenda. Does anybody have anything they would like pulled from the consent agenda? Seeing nothing, do we have a motion to approve?
I move to approve items 1 through 5 on the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Item carries. Next item on the agenda then is reports and announcements. And first item is Parks and Rec Committee. I think Sam is gone. So do we have a report from Parks and Rec? No. Okay,
I'm
thank
sorry,
you.
I'm sleeping over here looking at the planning commission. Really the major discussion that we had, was the budget updates and the project list that were in the consent agenda packet for your review today.
Thank you. Thank you. Next item is create Waunakee.
Yeah, we met on the 8th, I think. Lots of events going on, lots of things upcoming. We continue to sponsor a table at the farmer's market for a local maker, which is a great way to get them the opportunity. Art on Main auction is live. And then that will end, I think, the Friday before Oktoberfest. And then there'll be a live auction picking up where the online bidding ended. And then the Waunakee Artisan Market is October 5th. So get that on your calendars.
Right. And next up is EMS Commission, and I subbed for Robert on EMS Commission. Three things that we went over. We went over calls. Second thing we went over is updates to equipment. And then the third thing is the budget. We went through a preliminary budget, and I would like to remind everybody that this upcoming meeting for EMS, the budget will be reviewed and approved in that one meeting altogether. It is an open meeting, so if you're interested, of course, please arrive and feel free to make comment during the public comment portion. So it was a good meeting. Next up is Public Works Committee.
Public Works Committee meeting met, and we took care of what's on the consent agenda tonight as item number 3, which is to approve awarding of low bid for site remediation at Waunakee Village Center, 333 South Madison Street. And we looked at the bids, and the low bid got it. We actually had 2 bids. The company that got it was Integrity Grading and Excavating. We all Prospect Road project is also finished, and it was a short meeting. Thanks.
All right. And next up is Plan Commission.
Also a fairly short meeting. The first 2 items that were on the agenda had received a lot of discussion in prior meetings. The first was a conditional use permit for Northridge Church and their last piece of approvals by us that were needed. And the second was a combining of lots on 205 North Main Drive as part of the police department remodel and addition that will be taking place. And then the third item was discussion and to change the zoning, the village ordinance to allow for the maximum size, to increase the size of accessory dwelling units to coincide with the ADU, the accessory dwelling unit approval that had been previously made. There was pretty good discussion around that, and that I believe is coming back for the Planning Commission.
Yeah, it was
for further
accessory
discussion.
units to match accessory dwelling units.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know.
a lot of
get it.
accessory.
I keep saying it backwards too. Yeah, yeah. So, all right. Thank you. Joint Plan Commission was canceled. Community Development Authority was canceled. Do we have any other committees, boards, or commissions that met? Any other announcements to be made? All right, seeing none, the next thing on our list then is a presentation and discussion of the fire organizational review and future needs analysis. Todd, they're in the basement yet. Could we send somebody down to let them know it's time to come up?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. All right. No other announcements while we're waiting? So, no. All right. We'll recess for a few seconds while they come up. All right, thank you. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Robert Whitaker, I would like to thank you for being here tonight as a representative of McMahon Associates and for doing this study. You're going to present the findings today. Today, we are not going to ask questions or go into depth about it. We're going to have that meeting in another month after we've had time to digest and read the report thoroughly. And I also want to thank you for coming early today. You met with me and John Kusha, Brian and Gary as well, in order to just kind of get a little idea of what we're going to be seeing tonight. But that was a pretty brief meeting, so I appreciate you being here and presenting the results to us. But thank you.
There we go. I'm gonna move it up here. Taller than the stand. So are we good for back there? Okay, good evening. Thanks for having me. As the president said, my name is Robert Whitaker. I am with McMahon and Associates. We are a firm that primarily does a lot of architecture and engineering work, but we have an arm that does public safety and municipal management consulting, recruiting for positions. But our architects and engineers are the majority stakeholders in the company. And as you can see, our logo still says architects and engineers. So my boss gets frustrated with that, but that's where I'm from. I'm one of 4 or 5 team members that worked on this project. We were brought on to look at, by the village, to look at an organizational review and needs analysis for the department to include staffing, operational effectiveness, funding, methodology, and governing structure. So as you well know, and I told Kristen, every time I come here, there's some sort of new like land being torn up for a development. You're a growing community. Dane County is growing. All the municipalities that the district serves are growing. So I think it's a prudent step forward to look at this and say, what does this look like in the future? As part of that future look, we also looked at what does it look like now? So there's sort of two dynamics here that we'll talk about tonight and go through this. There's 30, I believe it's 31 recommendations included in the report. What I want you to all know going into what I'm going to talk about is that from a very high level perspective, you have a very dedicated group of firefighters, members of the department that provide a really quality service, especially as a volunteer fire department. I get to do this. This is a part-time role for me. I'm a full-time fire chief in a larger department from the state's perspective, not a really big one, but with all career people. And even recruiting all career people to do this as a full-time job is a challenge today. 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. I could pick out of a crowd and we'd have 200 applicants for 4 or 5 jobs. Totally different situation today. So when you talk about people who are doing it for a lower, less than their normal income or their sort of household sustainability, you have a really quality group of people. You have more people than most communities would have doing it. And from a very high level perspective, operationally, you're in a good place. But you need to plan for the future. There are also some things in the agreement, the governance structure, that we have some suggestions for you as the village, who is our client here, that I'll walk through. So normally, in a lot of these cases, I go with my team and we walk into a place to do a study, and in about 5 minutes what you're doing. You're like, oh man, this is there's some challenges here. That wasn't the case here from an operational perspective. So we really we'll talk about some future stuff here. It's from your operations. Like I said, you have a committed group of people. There's 31 recommendations here. We categorize our recommendations in our report by categories. The first category is governance and administration. This is probably where a meat of the recommendations that you'll see tonight are. This is the sort of this isn't the red trucks. This isn't the putting water on a fire. This is governance of an organization. What is that in that intergovernmental agreement that binds this district together?
And just so everybody knows who's here, I asked Robert to bring a big pile of the report results. And I know on the back of that, I think you have a summary of all these recommendations. To also we can get the email out with the PowerPoint as well. So for everybody who's here, I know we handed the report out to the board, but everybody here should be able to grab a copy before they leave.
There's copies up there. On the back of it, I think it's the back 3 pages. Each one of these recommendations, this is just in a chart, so you have a quick, easy reference to what I'm sort of talking about. So your district operating agreement is a intergovernmental agreement. That's probably the wave of the future in Wisconsin for fire and EMS services is intergovernmental cooperation. No one has, unless you're a large community, the investment. So working together with your neighbors is a positive. The district operating agreement, we feel there is a need to add a provision that has a fire commission in it. The fire commission under statutes, you may be familiar with, in some communities, that's a police and fire commission. In Waunakee, you have a police commission. We feel that there should be a provision in there to comply with the statute that there is a commission for the fire department that does appoint the chief and confirm appointments as subordinates. And there's a ton of language in the statutes about what their powers and authority is. But we are strongly recommending and saying that this is something moving forward you should do. It also, we feel that you should, and it doesn't need to be an immediate transition, but your next chief, you should look at appointing a full-time chief. And that there's enough work for 2 full-time positions in the fire department. Right now, there's 1 full-time position, and there's a need for a full-time chief officer position in the department. There is a provision in that agreement for a financial audit. It talks about doing that an annual financial audit. That's not currently being done. We're not saying that there was any hint of any malfeasance or any sort of things wrong. We're just saying the agreement says do an annual financial audit, so there should be one done. The village includes in their municipal audit some work on the fire department currently. We're saying the district should do their own audit. We looked at part of the RFP was for the consulting firm to look at the cost share and how the costs are shared between the municipalities that are part of the district. The district currently shares costs by equalized value. So in other words, just like your school district might divide equal cost share between municipalities, the village does equalized value when you levy your property tax, which you're probably very familiar with. We looked at different ways that costs are shared between municipalities in intergovernmental agreement fire departments across the state, and said, let's build up some formulas and say, is this something that is, 1, fair? And then 2, from the village's perspective as the client, is that something that makes sense? So your equalized value, the chart on the right, shows equalized value over the last 4 budgets. And your equalized value, because of how data is made available from the state, your 2024 budget is done with 2022 equalized value. And so it's sort of a lag there. We looked at 3 or 4 other ways to split costs. That's common. Other ways to split cost are population, calls for service, square miles. Those are some of the more common ones we see throughout the state. Wisconsin's a little unique to some of our surrounding states because in surrounding states, they have legislation that allows fire districts to be a taxing entity. Wisconsin does not currently allow that under statutes. So you go to Illinois, some other states, Colorado is another big one, not that they're next to us, but they have legislation that says like a school district, a fire district can levy a property tax, and that's not the case here in Wisconsin. So other communities that have intergovernmental agreements have looked at different ways to share cost. In the end, we came up with, we looked at different ways, and in all the different ways we looked at, you were very close to how you're sharing your cost now when we started factoring in those other factors. So in our opinion, maintaining the current equalized value makes the most sense. In the end, that agreement should also be reviewed. Last update was 2012. So we're recommending that it just get a once over by qualified attorneys representing the municipalities that participate. There's the intergovernmental agreement was unique in our opinion in that not only are 4 municipalities part of an intergovernmental agreement, the Waunakee Volunteer Fire Department is part of the intergovernmental agreement. That's something we have not seen before. And we feel that, in our opinion, and this may not be the opinion of any legal counsel, but in our opinion, from the village's perspective moving forward, the municipality should be party to that agreement. And it's an intergovernmental agreement. It's not an agreement that the volunteer fire department should be a party to. And the volunteer fire department, in the sense here in Waunakee, is the firefighters, the members of the department. I don't think it changes much, but we feel that from moving forward, that would be a change you need to make. We talked about the fire commission already earlier. The number 7, you have an interesting dynamic on the board for the fire district on how the seats are voted or seats are given. So the village has 2 seats. The towns that you participate with each have a seat. So you could run into situations where you're paying about 71% of the fire department costs. And for things like a budget, you are outvoted just based on simple majority of the makeup of the board. We, as McMahon consultants, support intergovernmental cooperation and the intergovernmental agreement. We think that's the way to continue to provide service if you can. But a community paying 70% of the cost should have more weight or votes on issues specifically like the annual budget or major purchases. There are ways to work on maybe not adding seats on the board, but coming up with some supermajority type language for certain votes, like the annual budget or major purchases. But that's something the village should seek to get changed in the intergovernmental agreement. There was the department's growing. So you have, and as you look at having, and we'll talk a little bit about positions and full-time staffing and things like that in a little bit. But as those costs go up, and costs today only go up, I think, I don't know that we see costs that are going down on a regular basis, but there should be some level of, as the budget for the department gets developed and updated prior to the board meeting where they vote on the budget, there should be some level of subcommittee work to develop some of those things. So the municipalities that are party to the department can have some understanding prior to that actual night or day, the meeting. Here's where we're at, because you all as municipalities fall under restrictions, whether that's the levy limits, if you participate in expenditure restraint, or I don't think you guys do, but I know some of the towns might, that you're up against is caps. And so knowing that going in and having some input from the administrative staff in the village and the towns would be helpful. As far as intergovernmental agreement, one thing that I think wouldn't be, we're not saying this is by statute, but the state statute allows joint fire departments to exempt from their levy, or I'm sorry, the municipalities that participate in joint fire departments to exempt from their levy a cost increase of up to CPI plus 2%. So that is normally more than what your levy limit is, depending on what your community's net new construction is and all those other things that go into levy limits. That can be helpful, especially in a growing community. Or a growing department where costs are exceeding, cost increases to maintain or meet the service need are above what your levy limit is. So that's in the statutes. We're recommending that gets put in the agreement. Doesn't mean you have to use it, but it would be something that would be something that future boards could take advantage of if needed. There's a statement in there about no employer relationship exists between the volunteer fire department and the municipalities. We just want to clarify that it's our opinion that the firefighters are employees of the district. That may be something you want to make sure is clarified. They're not employees of the municipalities, but they're employees of the district. And at some point, our impression as far as the consulting team was that a lot of members of the department feel that there's only one employee of the district, and that's a full-time employee. And that in essence, it's our opinion that all the members are employees of the district. They receive compensation for work. They have workers' comp benefits, that there should be clarified that all the employees or all the members of the department are employees of the district. And there's some perception within the organization that they're not. Number 11 is to add a dispute resolution to the agreement. Right now, the only way for a community that's upset with something, a provision in the agreement, is to withdraw. I don't think that's a positive way to manage dispute, but to have a dispute resolution process in the agreement. And then a process to consider and adopt amendments to that agreement also. So in other words, if someone said we're not happy, and you can't get any movement, your only process is to say, I leave. And that's probably not a healthy way. So what's the process to then amend the agreement? Does that require a a unanimous vote of the board? Does that require supermajority vote? That's to add that. Number 13 is to have, once you have a full-time chief, start looking at documenting your risk. This is it's called a community risk assessment. It's something that gives primarily the board and elected officials an idea of the fire department, primarily, probably a lot of the people in here know what your risk is. It's documenting that risk and having so we can educate the citizens, the elected officials of what that risk is. It's not something that's an immediate recommendation. It's something to move forward in the future, as is trying to gauge what is your goals for service. So right now, fire departments are generally judged on response time. So how quick did you get there? And that's a really good goal to have. But when you ask residents, how quick do you want your fire department to get there? They're just going to, most of them will say as fast as they can. And what that time drives is cost. So you could develop and put together a fire department that gets somewhere in 2 minutes. It's going to be a really expensive fire department. You can put together a fire department that gets somewhere in 25 minutes. It may not cost you a lot, but it may not be acceptable to the residents of your community. So what is that acceptable level? And then once that's defined, are we meeting that level of service or not? Helps define at what point, and that was one of the questions in the RFP, is at what point do we need to look at doing something more for the department? When does growth meet that need for we have to add employees? So you can all plan for that in the future. This talks about a strategic plan, creating that plan. What are those goals? What's that threshold? What do we need to do? So there's buy-in. You have 4 municipalities. You have a lot of stakeholders. So communicating the goals of the department annually is important. So when you get to talking, you have 2 board members that sit on the fire board, but you also are as the rest of the village board talking about finances. The village manager, Todd's involved in finances. You have staff here. Where's the fire department going? What's the direction? You have a big group of people on the department that want to know, hey, am I buying into where this organization is going? Have some goals. What are we working toward? Where are we going as an organization? This recommendation, as I understand it, there's an unwritten policy or understanding on this. We're saying formalize that understanding is what is the staff able to purchase outside of, so in other words, there's an emergency, there's a repair that has to get done. There is, what is your purchasing policy? What do you have to get 3 bit quotes on for purchasing? This is a fire board recommendation. It's not necessarily for the village board, but something that we recommend the district implement. So I talked a little before about response time. There are response time in the reports the fire board gets. There are lists of calls for service and how many people responded to those. I think it should be expanded to include what was the time it took to get to those calls, and then use that back to our point about goals for response time. What are we meeting those goals or not? That allows the board to have a better understanding of what service they're providing, what's the trigger that we have to make changes, or what's going on in the organization. So 19, 20, and 21, there was a lot of discussion identified in the interviews we did with the fire department staff about the need of the EMS for people to drive the ambulance. So at times, Waunakee EMS, because it's patients are really sick, they have a lot going on, they call and ask the fire department to provide a driver for the EMS service. There was, to be frank, some people that are very frustrated about how frequent that happens, and that the EMS should handle their own issues. So we came up, there's 3 recommendations here that we think could be considered. I don't think it's something that's going to be easily changed to say this should just stop. I don't know that that's a good practice. But there are 3 things. One is to expand the number of members of the fire district that can drive the ambulance. There's some restrictions as to who can do that. Opening that up may allow for more flexibility in who's available to do that. We talk about duty groups. So a duty group is having like on-call people. So right now, when that happens, it's a general page for the fire department. So you'll get a large group of people potentially coming for that and to manage that. So not everyone needs to show up for that call because really they're only looking for one, sometimes person to drive. And then the third point is the district could consider back charging EMS for the personnel time because you're paying someone to drive the ambulance and the EMS is billing the patient generally for that service. And there's a provision in the billing industry to do that. Recommendation 22, you have a, like I said before, you have a strong fire department. They're probably, from a volunteer perspective, stronger than most departments that we run into in our practice of consulting. Challenges in volunteer fire departments is that the group that's actively involved is aging up, 40 and 50-year-old people. But on the bottom, there's not as many people coming in as there are retiring, I'll call it, or aging out. That creates challenges in getting enough people to respond to calls. The other significant challenge operationally that exists today is that during daytime hours, the district is heavily reliant on the village's DPW staff who cross over as firefighters also to basically handle a lot of the calls for service. So as your community grows in the village, more responsibility gets put on that DPW staff. At some point, there could be a question of what's my priority? Your DPW staff have to plow snow, cut the grass, do maintenance. At some point, when does that call volume pull them away from their normal duty throughout the day? And I'm not saying we're close to that, but that's something to plan for. We were asked to come up with recommendations for future. At what point is that not as feasible as it is today? You have a current also group of businesses in the community that support letting people leave to go to calls too. And you have firefighters responding from those businesses. As call volume increases, which in a growing community, it's going to increase, at some point, we've seen employers start to say, hey, wait a second, you can't be leaving twice a day to go to a fire call. You know, once a week, maybe we can handle that. But multiple times throughout the day, that's a challenge. So as you look at that, and we have some recommendations later in the report for consideration of future needs, one of the other things operationally we think the department should implement is to look at what's called automatic aid. An automatic aid, you may have be accustomed to the term mutual aid. So in other words, departments helping other departments. Normally mutual aid is triggered when a member of the fire department, so a chief officer, an incident commander, someone gets on the radio and says, hey, I need help, send me help. Automatic aid is a little more refined version of that in the industry. That is, Dane County 911 gets a call. The caller says, hey, my building's on fire. They say some key words that they dispatch neighboring departments also automatically to assist. So in other words, the whole cavalry is coming. Shouldn't be for every call, but for certain calls that's high risk, structure fire, a major incident, not something that occurs all the time, but it gets people on the road, especially in communities that are relying significantly on volunteer paid on call workforces where they still have to mobilize from home, from work to get to the station. So it cuts out your time delay. We talked with the chief and some of his team before. This is something that you got to work out with your dispatch center. So you're not overusing your neighbors because you don't want to burn your neighbors out on these. It's not something you're going to do every day. It's going to be something that based on the caller's information, we think we have something that's significant and we need help and get them moving right away. And most of your neighbors are either smaller career or volunteer paid on call departments that are helping you. So you want to get those people moving from wherever they're coming from. 23. So in the order of my slides, this is a little bit ahead of where it is in the written report. So I'll explain the theory behind this. Later in the slides, there's a recommendation that I think the year 2039 is the specific year. You probably are looking at like a 24/7, 365 staff fire department here. You still have 15 years to get there. But 15 years, I didn't think 15 years ago I'd be where I'm at today. And all of a sudden 15 years goes by and here we are. So I'm sure in 15 years, whoever's sitting here is going to say, well, how come you didn't tell us? And from a financial planning perspective, you need to do some facility upgrades to get to that point. The village owns the facility. It's your building. There needs to be some, and it's probably going to be additional space. There's not much room for remodeling its current space that you can accommodate 24/7 workforce. So whatever that looks like, that's bathrooms for male, female, that's individual sleeping areas, because 24/7 they sleep at work at night. Right now, there's not enough space to do that. So something that as you're planning your capital expenditures, you need to start thinking about. The building's in really good shape. Sometimes I'll come up with 5 or 6 recommendations about a facility. We did not. The only recommendation we have on the facility is you install what's called a direct capture exhaust system. Diesel fumes, majority of the vehicles over there are diesel. It's not uncommon in our industry. Diesel fumes are significant causes of cancer. And to direct capture those exhausts, especially as you move toward a staffed fire station, and get those out of the building versus using a fan system in the ceiling, we feel is important for your employees. Recommendation 25, I think the department realizes this is probably coming, but their what is called records management system. So in other words, the software system that's used to maintain records of incidents, records of fire inspections, records of personnel activity, training, something that somewhere down the line, hopefully, something bad doesn't happen, but if you ever need records, you want training records, you want documentation that you trained your employees, you want documentation that you did your fire inspections, you want that easily accessible open records request. The system that the department or the district used, the software, unfortunately was one of the better systems that I've ever worked with, but they decided they were going to sell to a bigger company a couple years ago. And that always doesn't go well. And eventually the bigger company said, yeah, we're not going to keep this anymore. We're going to phase it out. And just like many departments across the country, Waunakee Fire District suffers from that company's decision to phase out what was a pretty good product. So they're currently using a free version of a software the state provides. It's very limited in its use because it's free. And guess what? You can buy, if you want, more than the free stuff. And so the vendor, offers that, but I will tell you, you need more than the free stuff. The free system basically allows them to file their incident reports. So in other words, FEMA, U.S. Fire Administration, under the federal government, requires fire departments to file a report for each response if you want to be eligible for grant funding and other things. So you have to file what's called a NIFRS report, and that's changing in the next couple of years to a different format. That's the free part of the software, but in our opinion, you need what they call the full version part of that software. That doesn't necessarily mean you go with the vendor that the state uses. There's multiple vendors out there that offer a good product, but it consolidates all your records. If someone says, did this person get training on this topic, you can find it. You can do your inspections. They're doing inspections on iPads. It's a product that will get its money out of your users, but you need to update that. And that's something you could probably plan for. You probably have a little bit of time on that. 26 is the human resources category. Right now, we believe that since all members of the district should be considered as employees of the district, it's important that the employee policy and personnel manual be updated. Right now, 2003, I think, is the last version it was updated. So we're recommending that document be updated to reflect current practices. 27, training and competencies. I'll say it again. You have a good fire department. They do a good job. The fun stuff for even me, who has a long career in the fire service, is not the paperwork. I'm one of the unique people probably that does this, that wants to sit down sometimes at a desk and do it. Most of the people that come into this work are are hands-on. I want to go to an emergency and get the job done. So sometimes we all suffer from not being the best at getting our documentation and paperwork in order. But the training and competencies, we're recommending there be job descriptions updated or formalized for each rank in the department. So when there are promotions, everyone understands what the minimum requirements are, who can apply, what I have to be able to do, what my education has to be to apply for those positions. It also, unfortunately, sometimes ties, it's important when there's some performance issues with employees that you have a document that says this is the job description, this is what you're required to do. 28, the department is working on this, having an annual training plan, making sure there's certain critical competencies that have to get trained on annually, have that in writing and documented. 30 is, this 30 and 31 are the two sort of long-term ones. So part of the RFP was to say, what should this, at what point, what's a trigger we need to look at staffing the fire department. It allows the village and the other partners in the department to plan. We all know that annual budgets aren't easy, that increasing your budget and adding positions is in some cases next to impossible sometimes, I feel. So what should the village and the other municipalities look for in the future? So we did some analysis of the calls, trends and changes, how much change has happened. So we think you're in a good spot right now. Adding that full-time chief is our recommendation, only immediate recommendation as far as staffing. And that could be something you do for the next budget year or in coincidence with the current chief's retirement. It's not something you need to do tomorrow. But what does that look like then in the future? So I talked earlier about the heavy reliance on the DPW and your local employers. I don't know exactly when that sort of becomes a bigger challenge. That's probably your trigger for when you need to, at the fire district, start planning on having some daytime staffing. And when I refer to daytime staffing, I mean people that are there Monday through Friday during the day when most of the volunteer paid on call staff works. So in other words, they're maybe not in the community during the day. They go somewhere else to work. They're in the community, but they can't leave their job. So you need some coverage for those calls. Our projection is 2029 is probably when your growth sort of gets to a point where we say you want to have some daytime staff. And what does that daytime staff look like? We talked about having a chief. We talked about having the current battalion chief / inspector position. But as far as other full-time employees, we talk about somewhere in the range of 2 other additional full-time employees supplemented by some part-time staff that works in the fire station. I'm going to call it for the purpose of my chart 7 to 5, but some places do 6 to 6. There's a variation that you can do what works best in combination with what your current volunteer paid on call staff and their work hours are. You still need the volunteers and paid on call. You're going to see the next chart 2039. You still need the volunteer / paid on call group. That's not something that's going to go away in this size department. But this we project. So your annual cost to add the chief, loaded up benefits and pay, we projected about $150,000. This is an additional in 2024 dollars, but we're talking 2029. So add in your cost increases and inflation. We're talking about $350,000 a year to do this. Recommendation 31 is saying by the year 2039, so 15 years from now, you want to be prepared for 24/7, 365 and have staffing in that station. And we looked at age of the fire department, made some projections based on that, recruiting, and then call volume, and said, where is this going to hit to the point where even at night, the call volume exceeds the ability for paid on call volunteers to cover that. And that primarily revolves around people who have jobs during the day at some point coming in 2 times overnight and then being there for an hour at a time or hour and a half at a time. You can't do it anymore. And that's, you saw, in my opinion, you saw that in your EMS a couple years ago. It just is not sustainable. I don't know how I go on less than 8 hours of sleep And, 20 years ago, different story, but that's tough when you have to show up the next day and do a job and then have been up for several hours the night before. So that's probably why people in their 50s don't have young babies generally, because you need to get your sleep. But so we're saying 2039, a chief, a battalion chief, so a number 2 kind of person, and then officer in charge on each shift, and there's 3 shifts you need for that. So an equipment operator, someone to drive the fire apparatus, and then 9 total firefighters, so 3 a shift. So you'd have minimum staffing, you'd have 4 people on duty at the fire station, an officer, a driver, and 2 firefighters. That gets you a response that can handle internal calls in the village, mutual aid calls with other communities. And then again, like I said, you still need the paid on call volunteers to support that. It's going to be recruiting. It's just going to keep getting tougher and tougher. The firefighters and the chief has done a good job maintaining that now. But across the board, you guys are unique. I'll tell you that right now. Most volunteer departments are really struggling to find new people. So it's something you need to be aware of as your community grows. You have more younger families that move in. You're building apartments, you're building homes. Some challenges that you're probably going to face at some point. Luckily for you, you haven't faced the big challenge that some communities are facing today just yet. So with that, next steps. As Todd said, there's copies of the report. They'll be made available for anyone after this. I've been scheduled to come back on the 16th, take questions, discuss it further. If you would like, and it would be appreciated for me, if you have any in-depth questions to give me a little bit of here's what I don't understand this, and I can bring some information that'll help support the discussion. If you can't, you don't want to, fine, I understand, but I'd look forward to being back on the 16th to discuss it further.
I can probably work to facilitate for the board as well as the department and the fire committee, a process to gather questions as best we can so we can have a really productive collaborative discussion then on the 16th.
Thank you so much, Robert, for being here.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Your time.
Oh, Kristen, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. We appreciate your time and the amount of work that you and your team put into the whole study. We appreciate it very much. And thank you to our firefighters for everything you do, but also for being here tonight and caring a lot about our community. We're not taking questions tonight on this, but we will on the 16th. So we'll save up all our questions and make sure we get them to you ahead of time if we've got complicated ones.
Kristen, one thing,
Yeah.
at least for the village board, I do want to make sure that with Robert here tonight, you can take advantage of asking him where you need understanding.
Mhm.
So if there's any recommendation that he offered that it's just not clicking or you don't follow, or you want better explanation on, Robert's here to help with that tonight as well. So tonight's about seeking understanding of what his recommendations are. Then we'll dive in deeper next time. So is there anything that isn't clear enough or?
Thank you for that clarification, Todd. Nyla, you had your hand up.
I just want to make a couple comments. Thank you, Robert, for your presentation. And I want to say I've been in town for 47 years and I've always felt safe due to our emergency system, police, fire, and EMS. And I'm thankful for that. And we're fortunate in that we have had the firefighters that we have had throughout the years. Many of them, I don't know how many people realize this, but many of them are generational firefighters. Some of these people have been born practically into a firefighting family. And I also want to thank not only you, but all your families who put up with you leaving a family function because there's a call, coming and going as necessary, and perhaps not seeing the family as much as your spouses and your children may like. It's a sacrifice for the entire family, and I realize that. And so I find this information very interesting, and I also look forward to working with the volunteer fire department for many years. Thank you.
Thank you, Nyla. That was wonderfully said. That was beautifully said. Anything else? Any clarification we need on the recommendations? No? Thank you so much. Yeah. And, oh, go ahead, Erin. Yeah.
One on recommendation 22 about the automatic aid or mutual aid Could you explain maybe like what we do now that I'm just not sure exactly how that
Yep,
would
sure.
need to be upgraded or changed?
So right now, mutual aid is what you do. And then it's gonna get in the weeds. I'll try to keep it as easy as I can. There's mutual aid, which means when we need help, we call for help. That is triggered by a member of the fire department saying, we need help. We send other departments. Automatic aid is the 911 dispatch center. Here's some key things in the call process that says they're going to likely need help. So we're just going to dispatch everyone at the same time. So there's not a delay in getting them
So
dispatched.
that shifts like who can request or who can be sending
Yeah, it basically gives the 911,
us or us to other people as both?
could be both.
Okay, that was my,
It gives the 911 dispatch centers that authority to pull that trigger.
Okay. thank you for clarifying.
Yep.
All right.
I did have a question maybe for Nyla and Robert. We had talked about the idea of offering this evening as an opportunity for the fire commission to sort of attend or jointly meet with us to receive the presentation. I don't see them here as a collective. Is that,
Well, I know that Westport is meeting right now for their town board meeting.
Yeah.
oh, so
They
there was
will be here,
conflict.
but I didn't hear anything from Springfield or.
Okay, I wanted to ask, and maybe if we can work aside on this, but would there be, would the committee be interested in seeing a presentation from Robert to receive the study results like you did?
You mean next Monday? Cause that's when we meet.
Well, I'm just wondering whether that'd be helpful, again, to collect feedback and other clarifying type questions so we can have another good discussion on the 16th.
We can discuss it, but I think, I mean, next Monday is probably very short notice for you. But we can take copies of the report with us to it and invite them to ask questions. They were invited to this meeting.
Okay.
And I know that John Kusha, who is Westport's rep,
He
have-
was,
and
he was
he's-
here at 5:30.
yeah, and he's been given multiple opportunities to give feedback. So I think that we can present it, Nyla or I could present it to
Okay.
them since they chose not to come tonight.
Also, perhaps, staff could contact them and, just give them the link where it'll be on YouTube. So that if they want to view it, they could.
Yep, good idea.
I think that might be a really nice way to make sure that they're getting the same information in the same way. Yeah, all right. Other comments or clarifying questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Robert. We appreciate it. Thank you all for being here tonight. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. It's super exciting tonight.
And
So,
Robert, you'll just leave the printed.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are welcome to grab, and if you want to take extras for any department members who aren't here, you feel free to share. We'll send it electronically too.
Clarification, because we have
Thank you.
the ability to scams.
I'll email you right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I'm sure the rest of the members that are not in attendance want to see it as quickly as possible.
Yep, I'll send it.
Thank you.
I'll forward right now.
All right. Next up, we talk road repairs. So thank you all very much. And Todd, you have spoken to the DOT about Highway 113.
Yeah, Bill's gonna join me in chatting about this. I'm gonna share my screen with just a Google map of the project area. And let's see, and then Bill's gonna start by filling you in on where the project is at as best we know. Bill has some accurate information from just a couple of hours ago as to some scheduling and how things are progressing. So Bill, why don't you lay that out and I'll bring up
Okay, earlier this evening, I talked with Patrick Weaver, the project coordinator on this project. And he informed me that the concrete on the bridge and what's going on with the bridge, they're hoping to have completed by the end of this week, weather permitting. And then they'll have to move into the railroad tracks removal, repair work. Unfortunately, couldn't do them both at the same time because there's a business in between there that they had to allow access to.
So just to be clear, I just want to make sure we can zoom in on things while we're talking about this bill.
Okay.
I'm gonna appreciate, because of the interest we've had from the neighborhoods, especially the northern neighborhoods in this area. I'm sure this video is gonna get some good views. So I want to make sure we take extra moments and point out specifically what we're talking about. So the bridge crossing work, that was in the area of the rail, right, Bill?
Can you go a little south?
Whoops, other south
Here's the bridge.
at the creek. Okay,
And
and that's been the primary focus initially,
correct.
along with the walking path.
Yep. The walking path will be part of the railroad, which then you go north.
Okay.
And obviously they're trying to maintain access to that classic custom homes is why they both weren't done at the same time. And I was told that tentatively right now, the railroad track improvements are scheduled for after Labor Day weekend or Labor Day. And at that same time, they will be doing that path and improving the path, the tracks on that path, so that walking path will be closed. They're estimating the time for that duration should be a 1 week, and they're hoping to have that path back open after a week, so at least then kids will be able to get to school and bike to school.
One thing I want to be clear that the DOT has always done this as a practice and it's the right thing to do. Whenever there's an immediate impact, whether it's a homeowner with a driveway or a business with their only point of access in a project area, the DOT goes to lengths to work on accommodating that access. I saw some kind of chatter about the golf course maintaining its access because God forbid golfers don't get to golf. Well, it's not about the golfers as it is about the golf course as a business with their only point of access on this corridor, just as Classic Custom Homes has, is that the name? Yeah,
Yes.
Classic Custom has business access right here, as are others. So that's the perspective I hope people can have when they think about the users with their only immediate access on this construction area.
Okay, and then my understanding is starting today, because this project runs from Sunset all the way to County V. And they started today, they're in the process of removing culverts and replacing culverts.
Is that along the whole corridor, Bill, all the way
Yeah,
to
all the
V?
way up from,
And that's, sorry, I'm
all the way to V.
scroll down a little bit. There it is.
There it is.
Up here.
And so they're anticipating that part of this project to basically take them a couple weeks to get that done. And then they're shooting for September 9th on milling the entire road and then starting pavement process thereafter. As it sits right now, they said the project is on schedule to be done by the end of September. And once the milling once the milling and pavement part of the project starts, they're anticipating that to last for 2 weeks. And then the last part of the month will be for striping, landscaping, and shouldering of the road. So, but during this whole process, the neighborhoods that'll still have access to their homes are the people that live on Lockmore, Troon Court, and Legends.
That's right.
They'll have access.
Yep. I'm moving my cursor over there. There we go. It's right there.
And the other part of this is Cup Road, the intersection at Cup Road. Even though it isn't looking at a major increase, but they are going to be putting some curb and curbs in there and trying to do some work with the drainage. So that's why there won't be any access out.
That's right here, Bill.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So there will be no access out of that
And we know that
intersection.
that's a dramatic pinch point for these neighborhoods. And we share the concerns that we've heard from residents in the neighborhood because to get into Waunakee proper or through Waunakee to go eastward, you've got to double back to the west and choose either Hellenbrand Road or go further to what's that next road there? Bill, whatever that.
Looks
one
like
is.
Whipperford.
There's a couple other roads that
Okay.
are that direction, but then you've got to make a left onto 19 to come back into Waunakee proper or beyond. And there, none of these neighborhoods are small, and there's a growing one in Golden Ponds as well. So that impact on those movement impacts on both the rural road system as well as on 19 and the left turning movements onto 19 are things that I think we all have concerns about. And we've shared with the DOT, I think their position as they've related back to us, Bill, and maybe I bet let you paraphrase. Basically, they're saying that it's okay to go that way, take a left and take a left. That's a legal maneuver. I think our concern is about the quantity and the timing, and also noting that this project won't be complete before the school starts. So there is going to be, at the start of the school year here, the impact of school and bus traffic.
All right. Thank you. Any more?
Did you have more, Bill, on?
No, other than,
We did ask the DOT to send a representative to join us today.
Mhm.
It was too short notice for them to
Mhm.
coordinate their plans. We've invited them to the next meeting of the village board in 2 weeks. What's that? The
September 3rd.
September 3rd meeting. And I think one thing the village board may want to do is specifically call for DOT presence at that meeting. That'll allow us as staff to urge their attendance as a way to talk about some of those concerns and those options. We also asked the DOT to consider holding a public informational meeting. They have declined to do that, with the answer basically being that there isn't more that they can tell people besides, here is your option. You can go left and pick one of those multiple roads to make that maneuver, and then share the very same things Bill shared, like the timing and the coordination of the project. I mean, projects like this don't just happen overnight. It's a multi-year process of planning and discussion. And Bill and I know, and a couple of the board members know, that we've made a variety of requests to the DOT over time in this process planning, including making improvements at Easy Street. If Sam was here, he would talk about that. A couple years ago, he was involved in making requests for turning lanes and other improvements that weren't received favorably by the state, but they heard our concerns and maybe are working on a little bit of pavement with for us, but I don't know how much.
Right.
So I guess the point being, for the DOT to hold the meeting now, the thought of a major change of any sort is unlikely at this point in the game. So in other words, what good would a community meeting do? I'm doing a lot of, those weren't the words
No.
that
Yeah.
they used, but
No.
that was, so the issue of bringing them back to join us on the 3rd is something that I think, I hope they take us up on.
I hope so too. They might not be able to change, but certainly answering questions that people have about why the decisions were made with regards to scheduling, even though it's not substantially different than what we said, helps to ease a lot of anxiety and helps people understand what's going on. I don't know, in my own life, I find out when people do not understand why we're doing something, we tend to get a lot of frustration, and we do explain what we're doing and why we're doing it, even if it's hugely inconvenient to them. They tend to go along and support projects. So how do we go about, do we need a motion? Do we need a letter that we all sign? How do we go about urging them to come and meet with us? And we're not going to bite, we're just going to ask questions and give people a chance to understand what's happening. What thoughts do we have? Anyone?
Well, either of those options work.
Work.
Staff has already extended the invitation, but a motion by the board to officially request DOT presence at the September 3rd board meeting is definitely helpful.
All right. I would like to make a motion that we officially request DOT to join us for a meeting.
As a resident of the Meadowbrook neighborhood, I will second that.
All right. Before we go to a vote, what questions or comments do we have? Nyla? Nothing? Nothing? Here.
It's not on the motion, so I don't know if this topic is done after that, but so should I wait on this?
No, we can still talk.
Well, I mean, just because you have this motion and if you take action, doesn't
Okay.
prohibit you, you're not forced to move on to the next agenda.
Okay, so I can just wait then if that works.
Joe?
It isn't, I guess, necessarily specific to the motion, but when they do arrive, I think one of the biggest focuses that I would like to hear them address is that left turn onto 19. That is a very difficult turn to make, even in good times. When we add this additional volume, I don't know what that's gonna look like, and I certainly don't want to see injuries and lives lost or anything of that nature that could happen there. So
Yeah. It's a hard turn to make.
it is.
On that note, I would add, it is difficult for the DOT, Bill knows this too, for them to control elements of local impacts related to their network. Their obligation is bigger and broader for moving traffic from point to point. Again, the answer will be there's more options that people have to choose for how they make their movements. And those are local choices. So it's a tough.
Yeah, I mean, and to your question, they'll just say you can go further west till you get to an intersection to where you feel it's safe to make that.
Whipperford is worse,
I'm just saying
as
that,
you know.
that's been the response.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, going west is gonna take them all the way to the Beltline and yeah, I don't know.
They do have a detour that runs you from out Highway I
Yeah,
up to V, okay.
yeah, it's,
I guess that was gonna be my only thing. Not that I don't support them coming. I think that's fine. And great. I guess I'm just confused if there's something that we're specifically asking for them beyond more like answers to the citizens, because yeah, to me, I'm like, there isn't really another option for moving that traffic. And yeah, that's not a great intersection, but I'm like, personally, I would, maybe go farther west and go on to 19, but I don't know. I just like, I feel like we're just putting them in like, what else would they have supposed to do? Like they can't detour on non-state highway anyways, or, so I don't know.
if I had to make a suggestion
Mhm.
for what they might want to consider doing, it would be specifically something at the intersection of 19 and Hellenbrand, potentially temporary stop signs for what, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? Maybe some temporary speed reduction through there. I don't think we're talking about anything that is, impossible to have happen. It's a matter of agreement and matter of everybody being on board that it should happen.
I guess
So-
I feel like we need to do that earlier than September 3rd because the project will be halfway done at that point,
I
and then
agree.
it's
That
by
is
the,
different.
like, school is starting, like, there's not really time for that to get into action. So then I just feel like we're saying like, well, why didn't you do this when it's
I mean,
already
frankly,
be
that,
happening? Like, we should have done this months ago. We've known about this project, so.
yeah, I can picture that, Joe, but that effort is a year in the making. They have to consider every driveway within stopping spaces and speeds, and it's a pretty intense scope of work, although it sounds like a simple, so I mean, I know you know that.
With all due respect, considering all of that in this particular scenario feels a little off considering everything that was not considered
Fair.
with an impact here.
Fair.
Yeah.
Yep. And a little concern, Bill and I have shared this. I remember talking directly to the project manager last week about this. The impact is on another state highway.
Mhm.
This is Highway 19 that's impacted. The state should be really concerned about what happens there. So,
And
we share the frustration.
yeah, I mean, and obviously there's, as I've been told, there's more than just one guy making decisions. So this has got to get ran through various other entities, I guess, to, before a decision can be made.
Well, let's get all the guys here.
Robert, did you?
Yeah, I do, actually. I was waiting. So this is also another municipality's issue, I would assume. Are we doing he who must not be named here? I assume. we're
No,
doing
no,
Springfield.
yeah.
Okay, nobody would said anything.
Yeah.
So Is it possible, and I may suggest this as an amendment, but is it possible to invite representatives from that, a representative from the municipality as well to come to that meeting? Because we have received considerable commentary from residents about Helen Brand Road as well as a part of this process. And I know that we're talking about the turn from Helen Brand onto 19, but I mean, I think there have been just as fair many complaints about Helen Brand in general, and a lot of confusion about who is responsible for Helen Brand, not the village for that part of it. And maybe allowing, because I think ultimately residents are just upset because they feel like they haven't had a chance to, I don't want to say vent because that's not the correct word, but ask questions. Because we're asking tonight some of those questions that I think that they want answered. And obviously there's nobody from DOT here, but I think also it would help if Springfield, it is just Springfield that we're talking about, right? It's not Westport as well.
Westport has that southern segment of Helen Brand is Westport.
Because I
not
mean,
the East.
I feel a little weird that we're the ones going to bat on the intersection of a road that is not something that we can ultimately control. Like we wouldn't do improvements to that part of Helen Brand. So I don't know how that factors into this. I was contemplating adding as an amendment, just if we could also ask those municipalities also to come, but if that's not reasonable, I won't suggest it.
Yeah, so I feel like they're two separate, related, but still distinctly separate. The, bridge and the railroad track and the detour that's occurring to our neighborhoods does route people through another municipality. So I'd like it if we can to keep that separate from Helen Brand. I would be a little concerned with, bringing other towns officials here as opposed to sending our residents to their meetings. To put them, I don't know that we don't have any influence over their decisions for the roads other than making requests, and we have made those requests, and we don't have any authority over them. So I don't know if that's necessarily a
Yeah,
great
because I was
venue
thinking,
for it.
more would
Yeah.
end up like a special meeting where we just have the DOT come in specifically for that
Yeah.
purpose. So that would,
I would invite them here as guests to
I
hear what the
mean,
DOT
I just
has to
wanna
say,
make
but I
sure-
wouldn't want to put them on the spot.
I just want to make sure that they're hearing this because it seems, it's a bit frustrating that we receive these comments and it's, the answer is just, well, go talk to Westport, go talk to Springfield. And then that's not a good enough answer. You're my elected, you should be doing that. So whatever staff or, Kristen, if you guys have ideas on how we can get that communication better, because it's not, I don't want to say it's not our problem. It is our problem, but we have to have a willing partner in getting this problem corrected. And it feels like it's a very one-sided conversation right now.
Yeah. When we're talking about Helen Brand Road, we have had that conversation casually. I don't know that we've had it formally and made a request, but it's been ongoing for years now. I think the discussion over Helen Brand, and I know you've talked to.
We actually had a meeting with both communities
Mhm.
prior to this project even being started.
Yeah,
Todd initiated and
so,
just weren't interested.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then maybe, then, and I know you want to keep it separate and I respect it, so
Yeah.
I'm not gonna make an amendment, but would it be possible in the future that we look at having maybe a formal letter from the village board asking those municipalities to look at taking, or at least make a formal response to us of some sort? Just if it's the formal responses, we're not going to do anything that you guys want to do to improve that, then at least we have something that we can say. We asked them
Yeah.
and they don't want to take action, and we can ask people to advocate with them, and we will obviously continue to advocate, but make it very clear that it's beyond our control at this time.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Yeah, I do.
Okay,
Mhm.
I'll
Yeah.
wait.
All right. So any other discussion on the motion? Tricia, I never formally called on you. Yeah, okay. All right. All right. Yes.
Before you do the other thing, I want to let you know, with the thought that the motion will close our discussion on this, I want to let you know that other things that staff are doing, we have a meeting tomorrow with the DOT representatives to talk about some of the questions. There's weekly project meetings with DOT and contractor and village representatives. I've contacted the school district and and Jeremy at Lamers, the bus guy, to try to coordinate discussions and see how quickly we can make sure that they're totally up to speed. And maybe they are,
Mhm.
but I'd want to make sure that the district is very clearly aware of what's going on along with the bus company. We also did a few things to note business open access. What we're also doing, Lauren and Kylie are going to be working on direct touch point meetings with every business through the corridor just to check in on how they're doing and see what else we perhaps can do to help. So those are some of the things that staff is doing behind the scenes.
Thank you guys for all the work on this. So road construction is always frustrating, but if we can ask questions, get some answers directly from the source, it might be helpful. Yes, Sarah.
You had mentioned this at Public Works, I think, about this project, but, and the DOT might have said this again in the meeting, but the timing of it, at least with the bridge reconstruction, was due to the need to wait till the fish spawning season. Was that right? Maybe?
Yes,
Okay, so that's another thing, like out
it
of,
delayed.
it delayed, yeah. And they do that for a lot of projects, so I don't know, just a thing for people to keep in mind, like it's not just like this part of the year too, without good reason, so.
Yeah. Actually, Sam had made that comment, so
Oh, okay. All right.
we'll give
Uh,
credit where credit's due.
Any other further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item on the agenda is recommendation to the Plan Commission for the repeal of section 1412 and creation of section 1451 and 133-1140. I need my reading glasses, related to beekeeping ordinances. So Todd? Lauren?
I was gonna say, I'm listed as the presenter. I can go, or if you want. That's fine. So this was actually an ordinance proposal that was originally contemplated over a year ago when the chicken keeping ordinance was proposed. It was combined with it, but we decided that it would be more palatable if it was split out so that there could be separate discussions, so it wasn't overwhelming to any parties involved, thinking that a lot of change was coming too fast. We wanted to give time to see how the chicken ordinance went and how people adapted to that, and the paperwork and everything that came with it for keeping of chickens. So the village actually has an existing ordinance as it relates to the keeping of bees. It's very restrictive. It requires a conditional use permit, and you have to have a notice and a hearing if you want to keep bees within the village. And it doesn't matter how many bees you want to, how many hives you'd want to have. It would just be any amount would need to go through the whole process. That's a bit, it doesn't match what we do now with allowing people by right to go in and as an additional or conditional use, as a, we were talking about dwellings earlier, so now I wouldn't say dwelling, but as an accessory use on a property, they can do everything, but they can't keep bees. So the language that's being proposed here would remove the ambiguity over what's acceptable for beekeeping within the village. It would allow it to be done as as a hobby process. So we're not talking commercial apiaries where there's like fields of bees, but very small amount. What's proposed within it, the licensing matches somewhat similar to chickens, except for there is no requirement for DATCAP registration when you're doing beekeeping. But it does go through the same process of accessory building permits. It does have considerations for minimums that are required for bee hives, such as height off the ground and things like that, so that they're not a nuisance. It would follow the timing and pricing of chickens licensing more or less. And the village would still retain their right to go in and inspect if there was any complaints about what was happening. This is a draft format. It would still need to go through the plan commission. Hopefully unlike the chicken one, we would get this on the scheduling so that they would have their full 2 cycles at plan commission to go through it. And yeah, I'll say that there will probably be changes from what you see in the draft format because as things inevitably go through plan commission, some changes are suggested. There are things that are a bit arbitrary, just like with chickens, like the maximum number of hives and things like that. That was just more or less, I will be honest, I again copped off of the city of Madison for some of those suggestions. So if we want to go smaller, I'm obviously not married to the numbers that are put in there. That being said, that's about the presentation. Unlike ADUs, I don't have a cool PowerPoint to go with this one, so.
All right, what comments or questions do we have? Nyla?
I just want to, I'm all for doing something with bees, but I need to say what I say for safety reasons. I'm highly allergic to bees, and I know this person that we came who's an expert on bees said that people are not allergic to bees. I believe that because he said that. I don't know that from experience. But I will say, because I have a friend who's a beekeeper and she's been doing it for years. And I picked up on the fact because we had a beekeeper next to our property. And when I told him that my husband had a portable sawmill that was put on our property and my husband used it, I could see that the beekeeper knew he needed to move the hives, and he did move them elsewhere on property. So I talked to my friend about it, and she said, yes, bees will swarm. They will go after somebody who's using something such as a chainsaw, mowing the lawn, et cetera, et cetera. It can be much, much worse when they swarm, if they swarm when it's really hot weather. And even though we've been told that they're not allergic, I fear them because I will swell up from a mosquito bite. And I think about a young child being in the backyard where the lawn's being mowed and a swarm of bees coming at them, and that could be horrific. I would not feel right if I did not provide this information. I'm not against bees, but I also have a question. If a person chooses to have chickens, can they still have bees?
I would say probably not, because they've used their accessory use item on their property, and we do restrict it to one.
Okay, that's what I wanted to verify. And I know I took a long way around with it, but okay, thank you.
I will say, to address some of the concern about swarming and things like that, we do explicitly call for flyway barriers in this. And those, I'm not an entomologist, so I'm not going to I don't understand how it works, but apparently when it comes to flyway barriers, for some reason, the bees actually respect those and they don't go like in those directions. There's obviously some sort of animal physics here that
Right.
I clearly do not
But
understand.
it also said it could be natural vegetation. And I don't know of much natural vegetation that will keep bees out. That's just from my experience, but
I think when they talk about natural vegetation and flyway barriers, they talk like trellises where people have grown like full around the trellis so that it like fills in the gaps in the trellis. The pictures that I've seen for the ones where they have that. We can get more explicit. This is a draft, so.
yeah, I just wanted to bring this information up. Perhaps there's more information out there that somebody could do research on. But I am not comfortable supporting something when I know there could be a safety issue. My entire life, safety has been a big part of my life. And so I would not feel right if I did not speak up about this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nyla. Joe. Trisha.
No, we've just had a lot of accessory accessory building conversations and planning. So I guess if it were ever to be considered, right now we're still talking about them in conjunction with the accessory dwelling unit, probably is either timely or not a good idea. I honestly don't know how I feel, but
We're just gonna have a lot of lively discussions.
a lot of lively discussions right now.
All right, Erin.
And support of us, recommending that they take a further look at it. I think bees are great. I think if someone's willing to do the work, to do it right and follow our process, like they should go for it. And it's a great way to connect our people to the natural world.
I'm gonna be a little bit with Nyla here. I like bees. I love fresh honey. I am not allergic to bees myself, but I am an EpiPen mom because I had a kid with a peanut, I still have a kid with a peanut allergy. And it's terrifying when somebody goes into anaphylactic shock. The conditional use permit, I understand why it's a hassle for applying for or starting a hobby. It's also the mechanism by which we learn whether or not we have neighbors who are, have a devastating allergy to something. So I would like us to see both be more accepting of beekeeping as a community, but then also recognize that if you live 1 yard or 2 yards over or within a certain radius, that conditional use permit might be the only notification and opportunity you have to say, you know, well, yes, I love honey. I'm also deathly allergic to bees. So I'm hoping that the Plan Commission will settle on something that is maybe both more inviting, but at the same time allows people to understand what their risk is and what risk their neighbors might be exposed to.
Can,
I thought, mhm.
can I ask, because I do plan on coming to the Plan Commission when
Yeah.
this gets presented, would it address a lot of concerns? Something that I have seen in some municipalities is when somebody wants to do beekeeping, there is an ask, not as a conditional use, but there's an ask that they reach out to their immediate adjacent neighbors, excuse me, and tell them that this is what they intend to do, to give them a chance to give feedback. Because I feel like even if you have a public hearing and they get the letter, they're gonna be like, I didn't show up to the meeting. Why did you let them put bees in? All 4 of us are gonna go into shock if a bee, you know what I mean? So at
Yeah.
least we could require them to have a positive, or at least attempt a positive contact with their neighbors and have their neighbors sign off on it. Some municipalities do that.
I would appreciate something like that.
Okay.
I feel like we need the ability to say no oftentimes. I mean, I get along great with my neighbors here. I have lived in communities where neighbors next door don't necessarily listen to or care for one another. So I can imagine a situation where a neighbor is like, great, you know, you should stay inside. And so I feel like there does need to be some sort of kind of teeth in the idea, not just go talk to your neighbors.
Well, the only issue I have with a conditional use permit, and I'll be completely honest, because chickens did not pass at the Plan Commission, is that I struggle with when we take things away by right, we're putting it in the hands of unelected officials to decide if you yourself should have this thing. And I feel like it opens us to exposure if we approve one and deny another, and the reason to the denied person may feel arbitrary versus the person that did get approved, if that was the case. You know, like if a Plan Commissioner is like, I'm not approving that, you're my neighbor,
Mhm.
you know, and they don't have a value. Do you get where I'm going with that? Where
Yeah.
it makes it too,
Yeah, I think my overriding concern is minimizing risk to people who might be legitimately harmed from this hobby. And can we as a community say that, you know, yes, you can have bees unless you are going to be exposing your neighbor to a risk that you yourself are not taking.
I'm gonna be jumping. I'm not even sure that's gonna be a basis to deny a conditional use permit because people move. People come, people go. And so, I mean,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, if you're gonna allow bees
Mhm.
in the village, you gotta live with the fact that
Mhm.
people might get stung. I mean, that's as elected officials, I think you have to live with that because I don't know the answer to this specifically, but my gut belief is that the Village Plan Commission would not be able to deny a conditional use permit simply because there's somebody who lives nearby who has other allergies to something. And because I thought I heard Nala say that we actually had someone come and speak here and said that people in fact are not allergic to bees. And what I've always heard is it's the amount of that you get stung by. If you get stung by a swarm of bees, you're going to be in trouble no matter what the circumstances are. I mean, I think there was literally just in the news right now where somebody somehow survived and his 2 horses actually died when a swarm of bees came, but
Excuse me, he said honeybees were not
honeybees, okay.
something people were allergic to.
Okay, so to be
I don't-
clear on the front end here, I
Yeah.
don't necessarily think that that's going to be a basis to deny a conditional use
Yeah.
permit.
I don't know that I recall him saying that people aren't allergic to bees. Yeah.
Because I followed up and
Mhm.
asked him, and
Yeah.
he said that honeybees
Mhm.
people weren't allergic to. And I questioned it, so at the.
All right. Well, go ahead.
Kind of a process question here. Obviously, if we make this motion and we move forward with it and it goes to the Plan Commission, that follows what it does. If we were to, if the motion were to fail this evening, what happens at that point? Can it be rebrought?
Well, I would say this, I mean, first of all, if you vote in favor of the motion tonight, that doesn't require you to vote in any way, shape or form at the Plan Commission or at the Village Board member. This is strictly a procedural motion tonight.
Yep.
There's also nothing that prevents staff, for example, or a Plan Commission member themselves to say, hey, I want this to come before. I mean, my gut would be that you should go through the process. It doesn't mean it's going to get approved, but that's the best way to get the information as opposed to not have it. I mean, because as I understand it, there's already language in the code right now, it sounds like, that allows Bs as conditional uses. And so the purpose of the potential here is that we're gonna kind of make things a little bit more similar to how we address other chickens. And so whenever you're looking to potentially correct some procedural issues in your code, I think it's always worthy to at least have that discussion.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, is there a motion or not a motion?
I'll motion to recommend the Plan Commission and Joint Plan Commission consider repeal of section 1412 and creation of sections 1451 and 133, 11,140 related to beekeeping ordinances.
Second.
All right, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No. So, all right. Motion passes.
Can I have a procedural question after we
Yes.
made that motion?
Yeah.
In between them, then it still doesn't mean that the conditional use permit can't still be considered as part of the planning commission process, correct?
Well, I mean, this is all gonna depend on what, I mean, now we're gonna have a discussion at the plan commission. I think one point of the discussion is to the extent that bees are allowed in the village, do you want it to be a permitted use or a conditional use? That's definitely gonna be part, sounds like be part of the discussion at the plan commission level. And then likely at the village board level also, because we've had this discussion a couple of times at the different plan commission where, I mean, and it was just at last meeting, plan commission is a body, they get to act, but at the end of the day, that is, at least on ordinances, that they make recommendations. The village board gets to do what the village board wants to do.
All right. Item number 3, discuss and take action on possible acquisition of property at 205 South Klein Drive. This is the former Waunakee property. And I'm just going to begin before we hand it over to staff by saying the village board may convene in closed session as authorized by Wisconsin State Statute 19.85 IE for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. The village board may reconvene again in open session and discuss and take action on the subject matter discussed in closed session. So with that, Todd.
Yeah, I'll just share so the community is aware. This is the property, the former Waunakee site. It's now owned by Summit Credit Union. The village has retained our environmental engineers, Ayers and Associates, and and Stafford with the environmental law specialist to help us review that property and review the options available to the village as it works to modify, improve, remediate the contamination that's known to be on site. And known because there's a DNR active open file on that property. So together with our consultants, we have had meetings, several meetings with the DNR. Kristen, you've been in a few of those. We've also now had a meeting or couple meetings. Lauren has been a part of this with Summit Credit Union and their chief officials related to real estate. So we're starting to talk to the upper brass at Summit Credit Union about what the village and Summit might do collaboratively to work on addressing the issues on the site. So we're going to bring in in closed session, bring in our consultants to fill you in specifically on the conversations we've had and what our next steps might be
All right.
related to the potential acquisition steps.
All right. Thank you. Then do we have any questions before we entertain a motion?
I would only note that I know Vanessa is watching. Vanessa will be ending this Zoom and we'll open up the new closed session Zoom. And then Scott will be joining us too.
All right. Then I'll make a motion to convene in closed session regarding the possible acquisition of the property at 205 South Klein, the former Waunakee property as authorized by Wisconsin State Statute 19.1 E.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on the motion?
Oh, it's a roll.
Well, it's a roll call vote. Yeah. Yep. Seeing none, roll call.
Joseph Sisberger,
Yes.
Nyla Fry,
Yes.
Kristen Rungy,
Yes.
Aaron Moran,
Yes.
Robert McPherson.
Yep.
Trisha Brown.
Yes.
All right. And